Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but the weather isn't at all how the weather apps forecast it. Although we started off with cloud and a little rain shower, we've got a bright sunny morning and it's just beautiful. This morning's shoot was not an amazing one. I think I got some okay images out of it. I was playing with panoramas and I was slowly making my way back as the tide came in. I was playing with the areas of dark sand where it had got trapped in the ripples left behind by the receding tide. I worked my way back up the beach and the tide as it came in destroyed the patterns in the sand, but I think I got some okay things. The weather wasn't amazing, but it was a nice way to start the day. One of the things I promised myself on this trip was that I would take a little bit more time over self-care. And what better way to do this than having a tea session? This is something I do on a daily basis when I'm back at home, so it's a really grounding ritual for me. And perhaps I've had tea with no better view than these sand dunes at Horgabost. I've got no solid plans for the rest of the day. I want to go and check out Seilebost, and there are some beautiful sand patterns there as well. One of the reasons I came to Horgabost this morning was that, one, I camped just there in the campsite, and two, because the compositions are all north-facing, and there's an alert that maybe on Tuesday there might be some possibility of aurora. You never know, and the weather is so changeable here. I've got no idea whether I'll get the opportunity. But Seilebost also has some north-facing compositions, so I want to get my eye in over there and see if anything might work for if the aurora does spark up. Wow, that was a bit of a downfall. Luckily my bag will dry off quickly in this wind. So while I'm waiting for another rain squall to blow through, I thought I'd talk you through my composition. I'm using the edge of the compacted sand as a lead-in line, and there are pools either side which create some lovely reflected colour. I didn't use much polarisation at all because it removes the reflection from the pools and reduces the contrast. The technical side of creating this photo has been a bit of a performance. I've been using the umbrella, one to keep the rain off, and two to stop the camera and tripod shaking and creating motion blur. Luckily the interesting part of the foreground is far enough away in this shot that I don't need to focus stack. I've been shooting at f11 with a faster shutter speed to make sure the picture is sharp. When a rainstorm does come through, I'll stop down and shoot for up to 30 seconds. Tarrency at that point will be blurred out by the rain between us and it, and a little bit of lens shake won't matter so much then. Over there by the sand dunes with the grass, when the rainstorm went through, at the end some lovely light cast in from the side, and I'm hoping we get a repeat of that performance. Hopefully the wind noise isn't too bad. I've got the microphone sheltered behind an umbrella to try and keep it off. So I quite liked that last composition, but it wasn't one that I was willing to stand around getting freezing for. And we've got this lower level sheet cloud that's moved in, and it doesn't seem like any dynamic light is coming anytime soon. I've moved on a bit further down the beach, and I found an area where this compacted sand has started to grow some seaweed on it, and it adds the colour and contrast that the foreground really needs with the lack of dynamic light.
I left Seilebost happy with what I'd achieved that day, and I set up camp in Luskentyre to be ready for a morning shoot there. Limited space shared between living and filming means that things can get a little chaotic on these trips, so in spite of the pouring rain that came in that evening, I gave my car a much needed tidy, and I offloaded the footage and images from the past 24 hours. I was content with my decision not to go for a sunset shoot. At least I thought I was. With the rain, it seemed likely that there would be no nice light, and I settled in to eat some dinner and catch up with emails and the family WhatsApp group. Right around when I was talking through the day's events with my wife, the light started up. I told myself I didn't need to go hunting, but as we hung up the phone, I knew my powers of resisting had already crumbled. So I pulled on my thick winter coat and went out onto the long stretch that is Luskentyre. I turned in later than I had hoped that night, but I think the images were probably worth it. I couldn't sleep for a while, but I didn't mind. My internal monologue was muted, and eventually I fell asleep to the sound of rain drumming on the car and the rhythm of my breathing blending with the mental white noise of pushing and pulling waves. I don't object to cloning per se. I treat finishing photos as an art project rather than travel photography or reportage. However, I take a pragmatic view when looking at an image like this. Is it worth the time to do the tidying up required to make this image as good as it could be? And even after the work, would this image be a standout among the many good photos I took on this trip? The sandgrasses on Seilebost are a good example. This image needs hardly any work to make it sing, just a few selective adjustments here and there to lead the eye through the frame in a pleasing way. I did have to remove some raindrops using the clone stamp, but I hope that no one will grudge me for doing that. As I suspected in the field, there was not enough contrast in the foreground of the compacted sand to make for a winning image, and I'm glad I moved on to the seaweed-covered sand. On returning from my trips, these video diaries take about 4 months to edit. Some of this delay comes down to video editing, but a lot of it is the photos themselves. It can take me a long time to work out a photo and edit it in the way I want. In between bouts of rain, I swapped from 24mm to 20. I thought the wider field of view would work well for me here, but looking at these images now, I got it right the first time. The 20mm lens brings in a little bit too much foreground, making visual flow harder to achieve. In addition, the rain moved in and fully obscured the lines of mountains on North Harris, and I don't think this worked to my advantage. Tarensy looks like it's floating in the top left corner, and the composition feels a little lopsided. The tighter 24mm on the other hand act as guardrails and helps lead your eye through the composition. Furthermore, in this shot, beyond the darker shapes of Luskentyre and Tarensy, the mountains are faded, but still present enough to make the framing look deliberate and subtly tie together these prominent background elements. I'm glad I went onto the sands of Luskentyre that evening. The Blue Ash shoot was a good opportunity for some long exposure photography looking towards Capaval. I like overexposing blue ash shots. It makes for an ethereal feeling that's hard to attain during the day. The aurora alerts never went off, but given the terrible weather, I wouldn't have ventured out of the car anyway. Despite being in a sheltered campsite, the wind and rain buffeted the car and made emerging deeply unappealing. I did brave it the next morning though, and went back onto the beach for a windy and rainy shoot. If you like what you've seen so far in this series, please consider subscribing and turn on notifications for when I release the next episode.